Let's learn about the seller's temporary residential lease, a very common addendum to the Texas real estate contract. We will refer to this very frequently in the industry as a leaseback or a seller's leaseback. It's called the seller's temporary residential lease. Now, in paragraph 10 of the contract, we address possession. So possession of the buyer's possession of the property either takes place upon closing and funding, which is one option in the contract, or it takes place according to a seller's temporary residential lease, which is this form that we'll go over now. So in the seller's temporary residential lease, paragraph 1 defines the parties. Now in this case, the buyer will actually be the landlord and the seller will be the tenant. So this is what happens when a buyer is going to let the seller live in the house after closing. Sometimes this can happen for a few days, sometimes a month or so. Anytime the seller is going to stay in the house after closing when they don't own it, you want to have a seller's temporary residential lease. So paragraph 1, there's a tenant, there's a landlord. Paragraph 2 gives the address of the property. Paragraph 3 gives the term of the lease. When is the lease up? What day will the seller actually move out? Paragraph 4 is the rent. What do you fill in for rent when you're a buyer and you're letting the seller stay? We do see customarily that buyers will let sellers live in the house for free for 1, 2, maybe 3 days. A lot of buyers don't really have a problem with that. It's when we get into the week or 2 weeks or a month that typically the buyer is going to want to see some rent because they're going to be paying a mortgage. Some realtors will put seller's PITI in this blank for paragraph 4. I prefer for the buyer to actually know what their mortgage is going to be so that at least the rent will cover their mortgage, and to put an actual number per day. Note in this paragraph that it says the rent starts the day after closing and funding, not the day of. So we do sort of skip a day, or there's a free rent day in there. Paragraph 5 is a security deposit. Most of the time we do not see a security deposit, and buyers and sellers will agree to write 0 in there. Utilities are almost always paid for in entirety by the tenant, and so we will put a not applicable in paragraph 6 because the tenant will pay all of the utilities. Use of property is pretty clear what the tenant can use the property for. And then pets, paragraph 8. So usually we will see a phrase in here like any pets currently living at the property. Obviously, if a seller has dogs or cats or birds or whatever and they sell the house, they should be allowed to keep their pets until they move out. The next few paragraphs, condition of the property, inspections, special provisions, alterations. We usually don't see anything in these paragraphs. They're pretty straightforward. Repairs and maintenance, the same. The next paragraph I want to go over is actually paragraph 18, termination. There's a common misconception on these seller's temporary residential leases. Often a seller will ask for extra time to move out, say 5 to 10 days, and they end up moving out early. Well, to terminate the lease, they need to get agreement in writing from the buyer or the landlord in this case. If you are a seller and you have 5 or 6 days to move out of the property, it's important for you to know that you have a lease during that entire 5, 6, 10 days, whatever you agree on, and you do have some responsibility for that property during the term of your lease, even if you've moved out. So if you plan on moving out early, make sure you get agreement from your buyer, or in this case, your temporary landlord. The other important thing to notice here is paragraph 19, holding over. What if the seller, or in this case, we'll call them the tenant, doesn't move out on time? We like to see a number in here that is almost a punitive number to really encourage that seller to get out on time. So often we'll see for a holding over, if they don't move out on time, $200, $300 a day per rent. That will encourage and motivate the seller to make sure they're out of the property on time. And of course, just like in the contract notices, paragraph 24, you need to know where you can send notices to the other party. Of course, if you're working with a real estate broker, that broker will more than likely accept notices on behalf of the parties. Okay, so that covers most of the seller's temporary residential lease, a very common addendum to the contract. Next, we'll go over the non-realty items addendum. And if you have any questions about these forms, please feel free to reach out to me. My name's Jay Robbins. I'm the broker at Robbins Real Estate Group. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.